where that is. There's a couple videos online I wanted to show you from Vimeo. How you take the Maxi and upload it to Bruno.
Yeah.
Some of the guys got it, click on the route and say upload route or whatever. It's pretty cool.
And it is somewhat difficult. I'll show you. You use USB ports to upload to your black box. You know where the black box is. That's the brains of the Furuno.
Yeah.
You can use that to upload. It's a little difficult to get to. You use a pair of needle nose pliers to stick it back in there and slide it in.
Okay.
But it's much better to have. I like to have backup over backup over backup. And so you can just plug the Max-C laptop in, and the Furuno will suck whatever charts it needs temporarily and show them up here. But then you don't have a standalone system. You must have a laptop and connectivity.
Yeah.
I like to have it if the laptop goes down, it's all right here, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I always upload to Furuno, and I don't know why it's extremely slow, and it doesn't give you any little, I call it eye candy, you know, progress 0 to 100%.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean jack as far as accuracy goes. It's just eye candy where you can see, oh, and now it's 47, 48, 49. It's only telling you it's not doing something. It's actually nowhere close to 47, 48, 49. Is my understanding.
Yeah.
But it's going to take a long time, but just plug it in and go do something else. And it'll tell you on the screen over here when it's all done. Okay, Explorer charts are the best. Okay, I was going into the US charts with the the vector charts and raster charts. And a raster chart is just a plain old photograph of this, a JPEG. You're zooming in, the pixels come out. You will notice in both charts, but it's much more obvious in raster charts, where this red line is of course the next zoom in chart. And if you zoom in either on a raster or a vector chart, you'll see a discontinuity of data. Like you might have 2100 feet. Well, you'll see just these random measurements of depths, and as soon as you cross that line and zoom in, suddenly there's a lot more. So there's a lot more detail in these zoom in charts that you don't bother putting on the big charts. Yeah. So as you see these discontinuities on the charts, whether it be raster or vector, just realize there's a finer detailed chart that's overlaid on that. And they call it tiling is the term. It tiles on top of. And as you zoom in, there's even more detail on this little area. That's downtown Nassau. So it'll look like there's some kind of error with the chart, but it's just more detail. So the vector charts and raster charts of the entire US are free. You download it every 6 months, something like that. And I'll show you how to do that at another lesson on the Furuno and Max-C. But they now, anything other than domestic US you have to buy. In the US, there's high definition satellite photos as well, what they call HSAT, high HSAT, or LSATs. If it's Columbia or something, they might not have an HSAT, but an LSAT. But all of those in the US are free. They're just large files. They're already preloaded on Furuno here for all of Florida and all of the Bahamas, and I probably have all of Pacific on there. You're limited obviously on amount of memory, but the black box version had enormous memory, and you're allowed like 32 different chart packages, and I might have 28 on there now. So if you want to add more, you have to delete some that you don't use. It's way more than you'll ever use, but I just wanted them all on there because I could. Yeah. Okay, and the same thing with Max-C. It's just limited how many charts you have immediately access to is a function of how big your hard drive is. Yeah. So there are many providers of international charts. One is Navionics. There's another, might be, Garmin's might be called MapTech or something like that, but there's many providers of charts for the world, and they're all different. They're all different formats, so that I can't buy yours and use it on the software, et cetera, et cetera. But one that everybody's adopted for their software too is Navionics, and from everything I've seen, that's the most popular one because their style of creating this vector chart is very pleasing. They have bought the rights to the Explorer charts and they vector charted them. So now you've got Bahamas charts on board for Uno, but they're old and ought to be updated. But when you do update it, then you'll get Explorer charts. You do have high resolution satellite photos of the Bahamas, which are almost more useful than the charts because it'll show you in this high res satellite photo where the route is through the coral reef. Now the blue line ought to coincide with that, but you can see exactly where you are and look ahead and see exactly where it is, and it's relatively accurate. So when you do want to buy those, you'll get the Explorer charts. Now these, and I would recommend getting the paper copies as well, just for backup. They come in 3 groups: the near Bahamas, kind of mid Bahamas, and far Bahamas. At least get near and mid. The far Bahamas with Turks and Caicos, you're not going to get that far. There's too much to see. And you know, Exumas is what Galen likes. We like the Abacos. So, but you got them all. So let's talk about what's what. There's the entire Bahamas, and you'll see kind of the nears are these, the mids, and then the fars are down in there. See far Exumas chart booking, you see the little blue line. Then there's another one, see near, or see Exumas chart book, the yellow lines, and then there's a near line. And it shows you where you are relative to Florida. So coming straight across down in here, under Grand Bahama, see there's Grand Bahama and Nassau. New Providence is the island, Nassau is the city. The Grand Bahama, that's right off Fort Lauderdale area, West Palm Beach area. Fort Pierce is up here. What we did when we went in to the Abacos in here is we just left from Fort Pierce. And came over, and then you can this is the long haul across the stream, and then you can start anchoring, getting some shelter back in here, and just kind of work your way down to in here. And these are all offshore protective islands and coral reefs, all the way from there all the way up to here. Little Walker Key, where is it? Okay, Walker Key is the first real inhabitable island. There's a couple others out beyond it. But as soon as you get onto the bank, and it's only 7, see, this is going to be in meters.
Meters.
Heights in meters. You would think depths. What's the depths?
Soundings and meters.
Oh, right there. Yeah, I'm reading upside down. So I can
Yeah.
Soundings and meters. So you're getting down to 21 feet here, less than 20 feet. All of a sudden, all the big waves get knocked down. There's no. It's out here that you can get the big waves. All of a sudden, you're in here, it can blow like stink, and you're not going to get big waves because it's only 20 feet deep. So you just work your way down through here between. This is Abaco Island here, and Grand Bahama. What you want to do, the Abacos is pretty much this whole area, right in here. You just work your way down here, anchoring off these little islands, working your way down, and Marsh Harbor, right where this elbow is, Marsh Harbor is the big town, right there. And then there's more protected waters that go all the way south to down in here, and then another way out from this is called the Sea of Abaco in here, and there's limited access through all these reefs, limited access into the Sea of Abaco, unless you're a local and you feel real lucky. So we'll talk about those access points. There's only 4 of them. but they're well placed.
You can't come in from the other side or from here. Or
Well,
Yeah, you're gonna
yeah,
be-
you can come in from this way.
But you can't just jump out here
Jump out
anytime,
there.
anytime you
Okay.
want.
You
yeah.
can't. This is too
Okay.
shoal to come through there.
right, gotcha.
You can come in from this way, stay in the Sea of Abaco, and
Okay.
exit here,
Okay.
and head down to Nassau if you wanted.
Okay.
But you can't just come and go any place you want to.
Okay.
And that's the bad news. The good news is the waves can't either.
Yeah.
So that's why you kind of look at going to Fort Pierce first,
Right.
because then you just shoot across
Yeah.
from Fort Pierce.
Okay.
Now, people will talk about crossing the Gulf Stream and having to. The technique for crossing the Gulf.
Do you want okay.
You can write it on ours. You want to keep it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you this one.
Yeah.
For crossing the Gulf Stream, let's say that's Florida, and here's where you're heading. Florida, Bahamas, over here, and the Gulf Stream is kind of in here. That might be 80 miles, nautical miles, across there, but this is only about 40 nautical miles to deal with the Gulf Stream.
Okay.
And people will talk about you want to end up, let's say you want to end up here, and you're departing here, and they'll say, okay, calculate how long you're going to be in this current, which is 5 knots or so. It's, you know, it's not much if you're a powerboat, but if your sail speed is 8 knots, 5 knots is a lot.
Yeah.
They'll talk about aim down this way and just have a constant heading the entire time. And what your track will be is like that, then get pushed up like that, and then you end up at your destination. So you end up doing a Z, or it's more like an S. They'll do the S turn across, because the current isn't just all of a sudden 6 knots. It's 6 knots right down the dead center of it, and it's 0, or 1 knot out in here. And actually, closer to Florida, sometimes you get back eddies, and actually there's a current going down that way, but you can ignore that. But they'll talk about a constant heading where you pick it, you get pushed up, and you pick it, and then you catch up again and end up over here. To me, it makes sense if you're swimming across a river and you really don't have that much, it's kind of sketchy.
Yeah.
You want to get across as fast as possible and screw. Just once you get to the current, go perpendicular. My theory is do this, just go perpendicular as fast as you can straight across. And so your boat will be crabbing. Of course, it'll be crabbing there, but here you want to adjust your heading so that you're doing this and minimizing the amount of time you're fighting the current. Here, that's the shortest route across, is straight across, and it's not where your boat's pointed.
Right.
It's where your boat is headed.
Yeah.
Difference between heading and course. So your heading is to the right, and you go across like this, break out the other side, and then you correct. It's like slipping on final approach. Once you start detecting you're in the Gulf Stream, just make sure your course takes you straight across, and then do that. So, that's what I think is the best way to do it. If they say, oh yeah, I just like one heading the whole time. Well, that's nice, but you're spending more time in the Gulf Stream.
Yeah.
And likewise, coming back, if you want to come back to St. Augustine, Bobby and I, instead of shooting a straight line towards St. Augustine, which is up here, we pretty much went right out into the middle, stayed in the middle for a day, and we're going 14 knots.
Yeah.
And then you break out and go over. And this distance that the Gulf Stream is offshore is part of the NOAA weather for coastal areas.
Yeah.
And it's as much as 17, 20, 25 miles offshore. They'll tell you every day in every forecast how far offshore they call it the western wall of the Gulf Stream is. And that's where you should start expecting to pick up that current, and of course the northerly wind component problems
Yeah.
that would associate it with it. So again, it isn't the entire width. It's only the center 40 miles. You get 20 miles approximately, and 20 miles approximately, and then you're on the Bahamas bank over here.
Okay.
And on one of these, let's see. I thought it was the near one. I thought it was one of these I drew out. I guess I'm not. I know it's on. Maybe it's just on Max C. The zones that NOAA has for weather along the coast. They'll have a zone that goes. And this will be part of the weather briefing
Yeah.
that I'll give you. But they have a zone that goes 20 miles offshore and another zone that goes 20 to 40 miles offshore.
Yeah.
And then they call it high seas.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the Bahamas, then you start getting into the Bahamas zones. But I've got those zones all mapped out on my Max C. So when I do my flight planning, I can say, okay, I'm going through zone A, B, and C, and I just go to that weather, A, B, and C, and I know what I've got.
Okay.
Much simpler because I already mapped it out. But they've got, it's 20 miles out, maybe 60 miles high, so it's a rectangle, another rectangle, another rectangle.
I saw that on the, what was that one book? The Passages South, Gentleman's
Gentleman's Guide to Passages South. Bruce Finn's in.
Bruce, yeah. He was talking about weather zones.
Well, it's improved a lot since he wrote that book. Okay, so let's look at Little Bahamas Bank. Let's just pretend you're going to the Bahamas. Galen might talk you out of it, but that's the
Abacos.
closest. I'm sorry, to the Abacos. He's definitely into the Exumas. The Exumas are another level of roughing it. I'll say there's little to no Wi-Fi, email, anything down there. And therefore services, parts availability, everything. You'd be better off going to a more sophisticated location